the interesting things about the Nintendo financial report is that Pokemon Legends ZA has sold like 12 million units. Like, mostly on Switch 1, but that all that does is kind of emphasize how viable of a console the Switch 1 is. Like, people are still going to be buying games for it. It's still going to be used. It's still going to be a pretty common thing in American households for a long time. The Switch 1 isn't going anywhere, and people are going to keep buying games on it. And that's something that I think a lot of people are really understating about Switch 1 right now, is that the Switch 2 hasn't really replaced it. They will coexist. They are going to keep selling Switch 1s. They are going to keep releasing Switch 1 games. They're still going to be readily available. It's going to be slowly phased out, probably like 3 years from now, but that is plenty of time for it to sell another 5 million units and surpass the sales numbers of the PS2, or the alleged sales numbers of the PS2, I should say, because, Sony fakes the sales numbers. So, the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo DS have both outsold the fake PS2 numbers that have been put out there by Sony, and it's becoming more and more commonly known that that's the case. So yeah, Nintendo has beaten Sony at their own game now. They've outsold them, and now it's just a matter of time until the rest of the world catches up to that. But the interesting thing about these numbers to me, looking at Pokemon Legends EA, is that this was a game that everyone massively hated. This is a game that everyone massively downplayed, that everyone said was shit, that everybody massively, massively despised, and yet the game sold 12 million units, okay? Pokemon is bigger than ever, right? And I do think Gen 10 is going to be this massive, massive milestone when it comes to Nintendo releases, especially if they make the decision to make this a Switch 1 and a Switch 2 title. I think people aren't really prepared for what that means because of the way Pokemon is designed, because it's made, because of the way it's made, because of the budget. It's very possible that this is going to be a game that's available on both Switch 1 and Switch 2 and is going to reach a consumer base of 180 million people. That is positively insane. If you really think about it, if you really think about what that means, again, too many people are downplaying the cross-gen, what being cross-gen actually means, is that it's going to be available on both platforms and is going to sell a lot more for people who haven't picked up Switch 2 yet. This isn't a knock against the Switch 2. It only helps Nintendo. People are not seeing the bigger picture in that regard. So, Gen 10, I expect, is probably going to be the biggest Pokemon release ever. I think it's going to be this huge, huge deal, especially if all the copes and seething from the gaming YouTube community collapses. Because I do think we're at the point now where people are learning not to take, YouTuber criticism of Pokemon seriously. We're kind of at that stage now where the stage is set for Gen 10 to be really, really popular and really, really successful. Pokepia is going to be huge. Pokemon's 30th anniversary. This is going to be a big, big, big deal. And people are kind of ignoring it. And I think the chief example of that is poor little forgotten Expedition 33. Claire Obscure won Game of the Year last year. It was worshipped. It was shilled. Everyone was backing this as the biggest RPG of the year, one of the best RPGs ever made, the best RPG since Final Fantasy VI. A lot of these outlets tried to say this was supposed to be a major cultural phenomenon, and it was supposed to be this big deal. It only sold 6 million units. After all of that hype, all of that praise, all of that worship, this game sold about half as well as Pokemon Legends EA, a spinoff. A spinoff to a game that is getting a new entry this year, plus, several other spinoffs. And I've been saying this for a long time, because it's so interesting how the narrative has always been that, Nintendo didn't have RPGs. That's a PlayStation thing, when Pokemon was a thing and had raped Final Fantasy right out the gate, was bigger than Dragon Quest almost immediately, became the biggest brand in the world. But no, keep telling yourself that it doesn't count as a real RPG because, I don't know, it doesn't have waifus or like waifu mechanics or anything. Like, again, Pokemon became the biggest brand in the world very, very quickly, but over the past 30 years, we have just seen this weird like attempt at subverting and destroying it. Whether it's like gaslighting people into thinking the anime isn't very good, or saying the games had fallen off because they were too repetitive, or like saying the trading card game wasn't popular or relevant. Like, people have done all these things to try and downplay the Pokemon brand, but in spite of that, it's become very, 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 very popular, right? Pokemon is, it's just unstoppable at this point. And it's so funny to me how people seriously thought that something like Temtem or Palworld or Digimon were ever going to, like, beat Pokemon at what it does. Like, it's not going to happen at this stage. Like, to beat Pokemon, you would have to have this, like, multimedia franchise that kind of, like, leans into each other for support and relevancy, right? Like, you don't have that kind of approach. You don't have, like, there's no brand out there that is able to stay so consistently high quality the way Pokemon does. And it's just one of those things that, like, the rest of the industry just cannot come to terms with. That Pokemon is bigger than Fortnite. It is bigger than Grand Theft Auto. It is bigger than COD. And those brands are on the verge of falling off, while Pokemon becomes bigger than ever. Like, it's remarkable how, like, we're going into the season and like every gaming YouTuber is trying to say that, like, oh yeah, Switch 2 has no games. The only game that could come out that could save it is Pokemon, but that's not a big deal, right? They're sneering at Pokopia, they're sneering at Pokemon Day. They're doing all this stuff, and it's just like they are going to be astonished by how well Gen 10 does. Like, they are going to be downright astonished by this. And like, I've said this a lot about, like, Pokopia and about Tamagotchi Life as well, but, like, it really does feel like the general gaming industry just doesn't want to admit that, like, Nintendo has kind of left them behind. They can seethe and moan all they want about how Nintendo has left their older fans behind, but, like, the reason for that is because you don't invest yourself into, like, any Nintendo brand other than, like, your childhood favorites. Like, we've seen so many people over the past, like, 20 years refuse to engage with, like, Fire Emblem, with Xenoblade, with Pokemon, with Splatoon, with, like, ARMS. We've seen this happen, Rhythm Heaven, Tamagotchi. We have seen so many times that, like, Nintendo unveils something really new and exciting, and then people just sit there and they just go, like, well, that's not a Smash Bros. Trailer. Like, why should I care about that? It's stupid. Like, it is ridiculous. And the fact that we're still, like, dealing with this 30 years later with Pokemon, how people still insist that it's not, like, a tentpole Nintendo franchise, that it's not some major deal and a major draw, it's embarrassing at this point. And I do think that's, like, the major takeaway about this is that, like, Expedition 33, it's interesting because, like, the industry awarded that Game of the Year. They worshipped it. They hyped it up. But, like, the game that people are actually going to remember is ZA. ZA sold more. It was more popular. It was longer. It had more things to do. It was just, like, a better game in general. And yet the narrative has always been this thing that, like, well, like, it's not a real RPG. It's just Pokemon. Yeah, Pokemon, the biggest brand in the world. It's something that I do think that we do need to speak out against. It's something that I'm very tired of hearing, and something that I do think we do need to, like, seriously talk about, like, dealing with, because this has been an absolute embarrassment. Like, this has been an absolute travesty in the sphere. Is just how long this has been going on, and just how desperate they are to push this narrative. Like, it absolutely 100% needs to stop today.